So I don't know if everyone is familiar with assistive technology. Olivia and I are still quite new in our positions. Actually, we've only been here for 3 years, actually. So assistive technology is very new to the school board. But really, assistive tech is really any piece of equipment that helps bypass student challenges, individual learning challenges. And many of our students, I don't know if there's families here from Mackay Center or any of our specialized settings, but you know, some students will use different types of assistive technology. You know, a wheelchair is a piece of assistive technology, but so is a pair of glasses, right? So assistive technology ranges very much in terms of its scope. But tonight we're going to be discussing specifically assistive technology for learning in the classroom. We're not going to be really covering anything with regards to mobility or access. That might be for a future webinar. We'd be happy to discuss those technologies as well. But for tonight, we're going to be discussing learning. Okay, and we want to mention that assistive technology supports our students' strengths. We always look for strengths that we can support in the classroom. Okay, so what do we do? Just to give you an idea of who we are, we do one-to-one consultations for students and teachers. So Olivia and I are never in the office. We're always running between schools. So East End, West End, we're constantly running, but we love it. We work one-to-one with students for individual consultations. Sometimes we do groups. We also work with teachers to be able to support them for the use of these technologies in the classroom. And if we're very lucky, we get to teach. on those days where we're feeling very lucky, we get to teach in the classrooms, which is the best. We do in-school workshops and board-wide workshops and workshops for you, for parents. This is actually our first parent webinar because we traditionally do in-person training, but we're so happy to try this format today because we think it's going to be a great future format. We also run professional learning communities for teachers. So again, we work with teachers to integrate the technologies into the classroom. Okay. So let's do some questions before we begin, just to get a sense of how your children are using assistive technology. If they are, don't worry if they're not, and this is all new. What you're going to do is you're going to open a new window on your computer, or you can use your phone as well. Okay, you're going to go to menti.com. This is a polling tool that we use online often because it's a sort of an easy way for us to gauge who's using what, or who's, you know, just to get a few ideas from who's here tonight. So you're going to go to menti.com and you're going to enter the code when it prompts you 126801. Okay. And I'm going to post the questions in a few seconds. I'm just going to wait till everybody can get on. If you don't want to do this, absolutely no problem. It's anonymous, so no one will see your name. It's just a couple of questions that we're all going to answer together. Okay, also, so menti.com.
If you don't want to leave the computer screen, sorry, Andrea, if you don't want to leave the computer screen and you have a phone nearby, you can do it from your phone too.
Okay, so I'm just going to scroll over here. All right. Does everybody see? Well, everybody's already filling it out, so you guys got the hang of it. I don't have to do an explanation. Okay, so really the first question is, does your child use assistive technology at school or at home? Okay, so no, 77%. Okay, so that yes is going up slightly. Unsure. Okay. This is just so Olivia and I get a sense of you know, gearing the demo towards if you're new to assistive technology or if you're, you know, if your children are advanced users. Okay, so I think most of you, it's fairly new, which is great because you're going to get a real intro tonight. Okay, I'm going to move on to the second question. Is anyone still, I'm going to wait just a few more seconds. All right, second question. If your child does use assistive technology, what kind of assistive technology does your child use? So this could be text-to-speech, which is, you know, the words are read out loud to your child on the screen. It could be word prediction, read and write. It could be a product. Maybe your child uses WordQ at home. Maybe they use apps on an iPad or on a tablet. WordQ, fantastic. Speechify, wow, fantastic. Everyone's getting motion sickness. I love word clouds, but when they start getting animated, you start feeling a little bit sick from the motion. Okay, so I think there's a few people using WordQ. which is actually one of our other technologies that we use very frequently at school, and we've also recommended it to parents at home. So it's very common that our students use WordQ. They use that for ministerial exams as well and board exams. Okay, and I think a lot of people, there's probably quite a few of your children who are using an iPad. Okay, okay, that gives us a good idea. Thank you so much for answering those questions. And I will go back to my screen. Hold on a sec. Okay, everybody's okay? You can see my screen? Okay. So we wanted to mention that accessibility is really everywhere at the moment. So we're covering one tool today, which is Read and Write, but all of our tools and all of our devices that we use every day, like our iPads, our phones, our computers, have accessibility options available to us. Okay, so whatever you have at home can be accessible. So that might be, you know, another workshop entirely, but you can make your iPad speak text if you like, or you can make your phone use speech recognition. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with Siri, but Siri is a way for you to speak into your phone, and you know, you can do a Google search for it, you can search for a restaurant, you can find all kinds of things through your voice. And that's a tool that we use in the classroom. It's called speech recognition. And we're going to show you that in Read and Write. So just to know that if you're not, you know, if you're unsure about what accessibility options exist, they're basically in everything at this point. And if you have questions, you can always email us, and we have several posts on our website that are about, you know, enabling your accessibility features on your devices. Okay. Whoops. Okay, so these are the support tools that are most helpful to our students at EMSB. Okay, and I'm going to explain what these features are because when you see the demo, it's really important to keep these in mind, because all of our literacy support tools at the board, meaning if you're using WordQ, if your child is using WordQ, they're using these features. Okay, so the features that are in Read and Write are the same as in WordQ. It's just a different product. Okay, the first one is text to speech. So text to speech, I think probably there's many people who might be familiar with it. The text on the screen is read out loud to your child. So if your child highlights the text on the screen, they can click a button, either a read button or you know, another button on the screen, and the text will be read out loud to your child. So this is really helpful for students who will have a lot of difficulty with reading. Okay, a lot of our children that we work with are better listeners than they are readers, and that's a real strength. So text to speech is very helpful for some children who do have those really, you know, great strengths in listening, but might have a lot of trouble with what we call decoding. And decoding is one function of reading. It's not the whole thing, right? There's many components of reading, but decoding is how students sound out words. And some children have difficulty with that. So we override it with text to speech. Okay, not at the very beginning when they're just learning to read, but when we know there's a sustained difficulty, we use text to speech to bypass the challenges that a child might have with reading, with decoding. Okay, and Olivia is going to show you a demo of that. The second one is word prediction, and word prediction is like what you see in the little window there. As the child types, okay, or as the student types, words pop up as suggestions. So this is really helpful for students who have a lot of difficulty with spelling. You know, they might get the first few letters, but then they struggle with the rest of the word, and that's very common. You know, that's so many of the students that we work with. And so that's very helpful for students who can get the first few letters, but they're like, oh, I'm not sure if it's swim, if it's an I after the W, or what it ends with. I can't hear the ending sound. So that's really helpful for that type of learner profile. Okay. And then the last one is voice recognition, where we talked about Siri, where if you speak into your phone, the words are pop up onto your screen. So that's a very helpful feature for many of our students, because when a child has a reading difficulty, they're often very, very tired because they're very challenged by all of the writing that they have to do. So sometimes we use voice recognition to bypass that complete exhaustion. Or sometimes if they have difficulty with word prediction, they're not sure about the first few letters. And, you know, as an example, if they can't get the SW in the word swim, and they have trouble hearing the first sound, sometimes we use voice recognition, and we let the kids know, just say it, just say the word, and it will pop up on the screen. So we use all of these tools in combination with each other, and the tool we're going to show you tonight has all of these features within that tool. Okay. I know it's sort of a lot because it's a lot to take in because, you know, these tools are fairly large tools. And there's also different learning profiles. So maybe your child would benefit from text-to-speech, but not word prediction, right? Or maybe they would benefit from word prediction, but not so much text-to-speech. So it's really important to work with your child's learning profile. And if you're not sure, you can ask your child's teacher to try different tools. And you can try them at home to see what would work. Okay, so it's important. What we really love about this tool is that it's available to all of our students. So all our students can try the tool. And if it works for that particular student, fantastic. And we really work, Olivia and I work individually with students to see what might work for a particular child. Okay, and you can do the same at home. Okay, I'm going to move on because I know we have a demo. Are there any questions so far on those features? If there's any questions, please feel free to type in the chat, and Olivia is going to get them back to me.
So a good question that came up. Someone's asking, so who helps to decide if AT could be in the IEP? So I mean, I'll start answering and I'll pass it to Andrea. So for assistive tech to be in the IEP, it's a multidisciplinary team. So typically it'll be a recommendation. The teacher will maybe flag a need for an assistive tech in the IEP since they're working with the students so regularly. And then we would have an SLP or a psychologist will often do an assessment. It's not necessary, but you know, it's kind of the best route. And then Andrea and myself will also come in at times to try different tools to then determine which assistive technology tool would be best for the student. But Andrea, if you want to add.
No, I think that's a perfect. I think all the information was in there. In terms of the IEP, yeah, it's a multidisciplinary decision. And really, most of the teachers, most resource teachers will who are working with the child will know what might work and be able to write that into the IEP.
Does that answer the question? And if there's any other questions, if you want to put them in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to move on to a demo.
Again, if there's any individual questions or anything specific to your child, you can also feel free to email us. And a good resource as well is also your school team, obviously, just to ask them about the assistive technologies as well at the school level.
And someone put another question that's really a good question that we can address. So it's not necessary, assistive technology won't be on every single IEP because it's not always the type of adaptation a student needs. So an IEP is an individualized education program. So if I give you, for example, a student who has difficulty paying attention in class, maybe assistive technology wouldn't be in line with their needs. Okay, and so I see like for specific cases, I think it's better we speak one-to-one because we're 30 people in the chat. But if you have, for a specific child, you can contact one of us and we can figure that out. But for now, we'll show you the tools today. And what's great is you can try them at home. So you could even kind of get a head start, see how your child responds to the tool, okay?
Okay.
So and one other thing, for really young children, so kindergarten 1 to 2, we often don't put assistive technology into place yet for a couple of reasons. It's complex. Like the child needs to have some form of, understanding of using a computer and be able to type, because or else it's just an added barrier for them. And also in grade 1 and 2, the texts aren't super long. So we don't often recommend text-to-speech in those grades.
And the other thing is with grades 1 and 2, kindergarten grade 1 and 2, I should say, students are still learning how to read. So we want to make sure that they have the ability or they have the time to be able to learn, decoding and all of the other, aspects of reading. But if we see that there's a sustained difficulty with decoding and it's affecting the child's comprehension, then yes, we would definitely intervene with some, assistive technology. But we want to give the child time because we know that, reading's not a natural process. It's something children have to learn. So it's something that has to be really, it's tough. It's a hard thing to learn, but we really want to give the child time to learn how to read. So specifically for literacy, we don't introduce assistive technology tools usually in the first cycle. But if there's a specific need, then yes. Okay, so I don't know if that answers the question as well with regards to reading. What's really great in cycle 1 is if your child is having difficulty with reading, is listening to your voice and having you read to your child. That's a really great intervention, and that's something that, you know, is very powerful. Okay, so I think we're going to move on with the demo.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to take over from there. So we're going to do a little demo, and I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Oops. All right. So read and write. What is it? How does it work? So first thing I'm going to point out, Read and Write is a tool developed by a company within Google called Text Help. So for that reason, it's only available. Do you guys see my screen, by the way? Or I'm not?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. So it's only available in Google Chrome as a browser. So if you have a Chromebook, you can install it there. If you have a Mac, a PC, you can install Chrome as your browser, and you'd be able to access Read and Write. Continuing on from that, so what is Read and Write? In Google Chrome, which is your browser, we have things called extensions, which are these little icons here on the top. So I have a whole bunch of them because I'm really into these things, but the one we're going to focus on is Read and Write. So it's this purple puzzle piece here on top. And so Read and Write isn't a free app. It's actually a paid app. Well, you call them extensions, but because the EMSB bought a license for the entire board, anybody with an EMSB email and password has access to the full version of this tool. So in order to gain access to this tool, a student would have to log in. So on the top here, you see my little character. Because I'm logged in with my @EMSB account, and I synced, that's how I gain access to the tool without paying for it, because it's paid for by the board. But for a student, they would have to sync themselves with the board to kind of, you know, show they're a member of the EMSB, and that's how it'll pop up. So how does Read and Write work? If I try to open it right here on this blank page, it won't work, because what it is it's a toolbar, and there's a bunch of different tools in there to help students with reading and writing and comprehension. There's a whole bunch of tools while they're on the web. Because there's nothing to read and write on this home page, it won't pop up if I click on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a web page, and I'm going to search Penguin Facts for Kids, just to give us an example. You can go on any web page on the internet. Okay, and we're going to find a page with some text. So if I were on this page and I was a student and I prefer listening to text as opposed to reading text. So when I click on the Read and Write tool, what you're going to see is a toolbar is going to pop up. Just a second. Yeah. So this toolbar here is your Read and Write toolbar that we keep talking about. So when I'm on the web in Chrome and I'm on a website with text, this toolbar will pop up. So what we're going to do for the next about 30 minutes, we're going to go through some, not all of the tools, but we're going to go through the tools that are the most useful from what we've seen for the students. So the first one I'm going to show you, which is super easy to use, is if a student wants to hear text read aloud, they can highlight the text with their mouse and press play.
Penguins belong to the bird family, but they cannot fly. They have black and white
feathers. If I want to stop, I'm going to press pause. That's to take a break. And if I'm really done, they can press stop. So I'm going to show you that again. So if a student wants to hear text read to them, they can highlight the text, press play.
They spend half of their life on land and the
pause, or stop. So that feature, we call that text to speech. It's integrated in a lot of different tools, as we mentioned earlier. In Read and Write, those features are called play, pause, and stop. Like that's their name for text to speech. That's one way of using text to speech with Read and Write. The other way the students can access the text with Read and Write is this tool here is called hover speech. So before I use it, so when I click on this tool, what's going to happen is when I put my mouse over the text without highlighting, without clicking, it'll start reading. So I hold.
They spend half of their life on land and the other half swimming in the water.
And it
So their
reads.
wings
I
have
can again
changed.
pause. I can stop. And when I'm done with hover speech, I click it again to turn it off.
So sorry to interrupt, Olivia. I just
No,
wanted
go
to
ahead.
mention who that would be good for.
Yeah.
So hover speech, yeah, because there's different ways to access text-to-speech. So if your child is able to click and highlight the text and then press play, fantastic. That's one way they can access text-to-speech. Some children have difficulty either with the keyboard or sometimes fine motor issues. So what we recommend is hover speech, because they can just one click and then they just click into the document, and it's less highlighting, less clicking, a little bit easier for fine motor access. Okay, but there's different ways to access. Sorry, Olivia.
No problem. Were there any other questions about the text-to-speech features in Read and Write? They're pretty straightforward. If you have questions, though, put them in the chat. Andrea's there answering. I'm going to keep going so we can see as many of the cool tools in there as possible.
So there's been some questions about how to control the speed.
Very good.
And also the voice. So maybe we can take a look at that now.
You read my mind. That's what I was going to go for next. So it's actually super important that the speed that the text-to-speech is running at is in line with what the students can track. They have to be able to somewhat keep track with it. So if it's too fast or too slow, they're either going to lose interest or get discouraged, right? So for all of the tools in the toolbar, if ever you want to make any modifications, these three little dots on the far right are where all your options are. So when I go into my options, what I'm working with now is the text-to-speech. So my options for my text-to-speech, I can change the voice. So if I want instead a masculine voice, I'm going to go to US English. And the reason we'll choose the US, I mean, it's the accent most close to ours. So we're going to go to US English, and then the speed can be adjusted here. Okay, so I can move that back and forth. Mine is at 30. So if you heard what we just played, that was a speed of 30. You can go faster or slower, of course. And oftentimes what I do for the speed is I'll sit with the child and we'll adjust it until we figure out the right speed. And then what's nice is at any time, remember when we spoke about earlier, signing into Chrome, whatever settings you set are going to follow you with your profile. So every time you log in, you don't have to reset the speed as long as you're using your account again, of course. So that's for text-to-speech. Were there any other questions?
I wanted to just mention there's one person who had mentioned they were having trouble seeing where the Read and Write extension was. What we're going to do is we're going to put at the end of the session, we're going to put a visual on how to log into Chrome. So that if you don't see the Read and Write button, you log in, you're not sure, it's not there, we're just going to send you some visual instructions on how to get that done. Okay? Yeah. I just wanted to mention. Yeah,
we'll send, so Read and Write will only pop up, like Andrea said, once you're signed in with the student's EMSB account and you're syncing your data. But we're going to send you, so we're going to send you pictures step by step. For now, you guys can sit back, relax. We'll make sure to send you everything. So another feature for when the students are online reading text is there is so integrated in my toolbar, there's a dictionary right here and a picture dictionary. So I'm going to show you how those two features work. So if I am online and I'm reading and I don't know, let's say the word camouflage, okay, what I can do is I can highlight a word I don't know and I can open my dictionary tool. So Read and Write actually calls this the talking dictionary because I don't know if you recognize that this button right here is one we looked at earlier. This is the play button. So students can then
camouflage.
Listen to the definition.
Now, fabric dyed with splotches of green and brown and black and tan.
Okay, there's multiple definitions. So the word camouflage, right? We know that camouflage can mean a couple different things. And oftentimes if a student doesn't know a word, a dictionary definition maybe isn't always the best way. So the other tool I'm going to show you is right next door to the dictionary. We have the picture dictionary. And what that does is it tries to give you a picture of the word you're looking for. Now, a little disclaimer, certain words are really difficult to come up with a picture for. So as great as the picture dictionary is, it won't work for every word. So I'll show you, for example, the word have. I'm sure it's going to try, right? But I mean, it's a good shot, but certain words are going to be difficult to find a picture of if they're nouns or adjectives. But sorry, if they're verbs or adjectives, you might have a harder time with the picture dictionary. But for nouns, like maybe feathers, okay, you'll get a picture, and oftentimes a picture is much easier than the dictionary definition. So those are the tools to help students with comprehension. So maybe they can sound out a new word, doesn't mean they know what it means. So you have the Pictionary there, picture dictionary there, sorry, to help them with that. Do we have questions about either of those tools before I show a couple others?
I don't think there's questions about this specific tool. If you have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat. I'm just following up on some individual questions about assistive technology.
No problem. So I'm going to keep going with some other tools. I'm going to close my picture dictionary and close my dictionary. Another little tip, if I use the picture dictionary a lot, I can leave it open. And as I'm reading, anytime there's a word I don't know, I can click on it and it'll update automatically. Okay.
I love those little flippers.
So those are the tools for comprehension of new vocabulary. We're going to continue on with another tool for comprehension of new words. So a tool that we have in here, which is a great tool for using for home, is this tool here is a translator tool. So sometimes if English is a student's second language, or oftentimes French is a student's second language, the translator tool can help in that you can set it in here. Remember our options. So in the far right, in my options, I can say my first language, pretend, let's say, is French, and I'm reading in English. So when I choose a word, so for example, feet, it'll translate the word to me in my native language, let's say. So for a student who is a second language learner, sometimes getting the immediate translation of that single word in their original language is a much quicker way to figure out what it means. And again, our famous play button is there. So if they would like, they can hear the word. Okay, it won't translate the entire page or the entire sentence, which we kind of love, because if they're trying to learn English or trying to learn French, they're going to be forced to read through the text. And only for the words where they really don't understand, they'll have that translating option for single words. But like the picture dictionary, they can keep it open at all times. So anytime there's a word they don't know, they can select it and hear it in their mother tongue. So that's the translator tool. Any questions about that one? Am I going too fast?
I think everyone's okay from the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free. I can't remember someone asked how many languages. Do you know offhand, Olivia?
I don't know. I know there's English and French, or you're saying for the translating?
For the translation, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. I know, like with students I've worked with, we've used, I think, Chinese, French, Greek, Italian.
I've used Korean.
Portuguese.
So, yeah.
I know I saw Arabic. I don't know. There's a lot, but there, yeah. I don't know. Okay.
And someone also asked, can the app be used in French?
Yes.
As well. Yes. Good question.
So, so if a child wants to use it in French, we would have to go into the options and change a couple settings. So I'm going to show you where they are, but I won't change them now, because if I set this to French and I have English text that I want to read, it's going to be a really funny experience. So if I go into the options, though, to change it to French, you would have to change two things. So for Read and Write to work for you in French, the first thing, super important, you would want it to have a French voice. Okay, so you wouldn't want it to read French text with an English accent, because that's even more confusing. So we have a French Canadian voice in there. That's the one we recommend typically for the students. So it's an accent, that's more familiar. So the voice is one. The second thing you would change is in the language here on the side, So I'm just going to explain the difference between these two here. So in language, if a student needs to read in French, you would want all of the features to be switched to French, okay? And then everything will work. It'll read in French, the dictionary will be in French, and all of the other tools I'm going to show you later. However, if you want the actual tool to be in French, so watch here. So you see the words on the side? So speech and prediction. If I change the language to French, all of those are going to change to French too. So the tool is going to be in French. It's not just going to work in French. It's going to be set to French. So here it would say langue and voix and prédiction if I were to switch the language to French. So if I just want it to work in French, it's features and the voice. If I want it completely in French, it's voice and it's language and features. Is that okay?
Sounds good, everybody? Okay.
Sounds good. All right.
Yes.
Yes,
so there was a question from Vanessa. So students would have to do this AM and PM depending on their language class. It's really easy to switch between both. So in terms of switching between English and French.
Yeah, it's not
I think that was the question.
Tool. Like there's different languages, so it's not just going to instantly recognize French. Maybe one day, I wouldn't be surprised. But for now, yeah, they have to make the switch.
Yeah.
Okay. So another really simple, another thing about the language. Like any other setting, if you change the language to French, like let's say right now I changed the language to French, then next time I come and use read and write, it'll be in the last language I left it in, okay? So it doesn't automatically go back to English. It keeps whatever setting you left it on.
Yeah, so if you're reading an English text and it's on the French voice, then you can laugh along with your children like we do when it reads in a French voice.
They think it's hilarious. They're gonna choose all of the voices with the accents first, and then you can get it.
Yeah, we've lived through it all, so we know. It's fun.
Okay. Another super easy to use tool. Okay. So if you were looking here in my toolbar, this tool here is called the screen mask tool. Okay. And this one blows everyone away. So when I turn on the screen mask, what that is it's a tracker to help me focus on different parts of the page. So if you see this little piece here, that comes up as, these are the settings for my screen mask. So I can move it out of my way. But basically as I read, the screen mask is going to help focus my eyes. Okay, so just to give you an idea, this you can change the width of the opening for the screen mask, and you can change the colors. If you noticed, when I turned it on, this came out. And in this little toolbar, right here is my settings, which allows me to adjust either the width, the height, they call it, of the reading light. So if I want to focus on one sentence at a time, or a whole paragraph at a time, or even maybe depending on the font, you might want to play around with that. You can change the color, which that's going to be real fun. They're going to try every color. They're going to try yellow first, little heads up. But so you can change the colors. We usually tell the kids to try to choose a color that's a little easy on the eyes, but you can play around with that. You can play around with the opacity, of the background. So I can make it less transparent, but then it's hard to find your way around. So we always suggest a little bit of transparency. And then like any other tool, once you find the settings that work for you, then next time you use that tool, it'll already be preset to the color and the height and the transparency that you want. Okay.
So who is this? I just wanted to mention who the screen mask is good for, because we don't use it not every student needs the screen mask. It's really for students sometimes who have difficulty with visual tracking. For some students have difficulty following along. Their eyes have difficulty going from one side to the other when they're reading. So this is a really great tool because it just sort of minimizes the rest of the page as well, and you can focus on those specific words. So if anyone has ever seen the low-tech tool, either putting a pencil underneath your words or a ruler, if anyone's ever done that in the past, this is just the high-tech version of that, but it's very helpful for students who might have visual tracking difficulties, which is sometimes what we see with specific types of dyslexia. Okay.
So one more tool here before I switch gears a little. So a really cool tool. So this is like a bonus for today because I didn't think we were going to have time. But something that students can do, or you can do for them, or their teachers will do. So if we're, for example, we've been reading about penguins all this time. What we can do, so everybody's always curious about these highlighters, okay? So they work in a couple of ways. I'm going to show you one of those ways today, but in the slides, we have the information on both. So one of the things that these highlighters can do is they're going to help you create a vocabulary list. So stay with me. This is going to be really cool. You're going to see. So as I'm reading, what I'm going to do is I'm reading online, right? And I'm going to highlight words that have to do with the topic. So penguin is a vocabulary word that's, you know, the topic that I'm looking at. Feathers, I'm going to highlight it. And notice I'm highlighting only like singular words, right? I'm not highlighting full sentences at a time. So we're going to highlight waddling, and we can go on and on until we're at the end of the page. So I'm going to highlight hemisphere, and we'll go for one more. Let's do Antarctica. Okay, so after I've highlighted certain vocabulary words on the website, I'm going to show you a really cool tool that's going to help me transition into the next little bunch. So this button here is the vocabulary tool. So watch what happens. All I'm doing is pressing that tool, and I promise I am not touching my keyboard. It's nothing fancy that I'm doing. So I'm just going to wait a little bit. And what the tool is going to do, it's going to generate a vocabulary list with all of those words I highlighted. Okay. So let me give it a second.
So cute, that little penguin.
Obsessed. So this here, it generated a vocabulary list. On the left in the first column, you're going to see those are all of the words that I highlighted. Okay, waddling didn't come up. Maybe waddle. And we can remember our dictionary tool. Okay, I can grab this and put it in. So maybe it didn't get waddling, so it got waddle. Okay, now the document that it just generated, my little vocabulary list here, okay, it's editable. Okay, so it might look like we're in Microsoft Word, but for those of you who aren't familiar, this is actually Google Docs. And the analogy I always give, so if you're familiar already with Microsoft Word, Microsoft and Google are competitors. So Microsoft has Microsoft Word, Google has Google Docs. And because Read&Write's a Google tool, they're going to put you into their Google Doc. They're going to keep you in their environment. But Google Docs is very easy to use. It looks really familiar. And an big advantage of Google Docs, everything saves automatically in that mysterious cloud everybody talks about. So that's all saved in the student's account. So remember, I logged in at the top. I'm logged into my doc, and that's where my vocabulary list will be saved. Another note, my vocabulary list, so it's in my Google Doc. I can edit it. So if for the word penguin, maybe all I needed is the picture. Maybe I don't need a definition to understand what a penguin is. And I can take out one of the pictures, for example. Okay. So just to recap what I just did to get to this, okay, I was on my initial website. I highlighted different vocabulary words, and the tool made me the vocabulary list. So when I pressed vocabulary, a vocabulary list was generated with my words. These were the definitions from the dictionary, and these are the definitions from the picture dictionary. Okay, this you can print if you wanted to, but no need to print, because then students can use, again, those read and write features to help them access this list. So if I highlight and press play, for example,
The soft light parts that
I can listen to the text that just went into my vocabulary list. Okay.
So I just wanted to mention that the toolbar, as Olivia mentioned, is multisensory. It's designed for multisensory reading. And when we say multisensory, it's designed to be able to read in the traditional sense, but also to listen. Okay, so everything is backed up through listening. Because we want students to use their strengths, and some students, again, are very strong listeners, some students are good readers, but it's designed to be multisensory, okay, so that students can access in different ways. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
No problem. So before I show you a couple other tools in my toolbar, I just want to show you two more. what I'm going to show you is, let's say your child wants to write a journal or a recipe, or they have to write for their homework for an assignment. If ever you want to get to Google Docs, like Microsoft Word, because you want the support of Read and Write, a little shortcut, if I do docs.google.com, I end up on the Google Doc homepage. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to show you some tools to support writing. So I'm going to start a blank document right here. And again, guys, everything's in the slides. So we've outlined everything in the slides for you step by step. So I'm in Google Docs, and I realize I'm going to write, so I'm going to change the title. This is going to be Journal for May 25th. And I need my Read and Write tools for support. So I'm going to click on Read and Write, and there's my toolbar. So what I'm going to show you now, I'm going to show you 2 tools, or 3, that are going to help for writing support. Okay. So the first tool I'm going to show you is word prediction. So word prediction is on the top over here. That it's supposed to look like a crystal ball. So the word prediction, what it's going to do, I'm going to increase my font so we can all see. As I write. Okay, so as I write, what it's doing is it's trying to guess what I'm going to write based on 2 things. Based on the way I'm spelling the word, but also based on the context of my sentence. So I'm writing the word write, and I can also, an additional thing, with my mouse, when I put it over the word, again, like Andrea said, it's a multisensory tool, so it'll read me the word.
Wrote. Wrong. Right.
So students can listen through the options if they need to hear which one is the one that they're trying to write. So as I write, it will.
Will.
Okay, so see, as I keep adding letters, the predictions are going to change, and they're going to get closer and closer to the word I'm trying to spell.
Predict.
Okay, another thing I want to point out, it's guessing based on phonetic spelling. So what that means is it's guessing based on the way I spell. If I were to write the word because I see this a lot, the word writing, right? We don't hear the W. So if I were to write it this way, right?
Recall. Right.
Okay. So based on what I spelled it as, there is the word right. But what I'll often see students do is they'll spell it phonetically the way I just did. But when they see the entire word, they recognize it and they'll input it. Okay. So that's the one tool to help with writing. Okay. So that's my word prediction tool.
Can I just mention something,
Yeah.
Olivia? Sorry, I just wanted to chime in for a sec. So it's actually just completely fine for students to listen to the words in the box. So if you're worried, some parents, like we get questions, oh, what if they don't, they're spelling and they're not sure, they'll get the word, but they're not sure like what it looks like, or they don't see the word. It's perfectly fine for them to run down the list and listen for the word. It's actually a really good strategy that we encourage. If the student is a stronger listener, it's a great strategy. So often, as Olivia said, students will pick out the word because they see it, but sometimes they don't see it, and their other option is to listen for it. So that's what we work on individually. Okay, sorry, Olivia, go ahead.
No problem. And yeah, so just another little thing I want to show you, because we've been kind of consistent with this, is like everything else, if I go to the far right over here, in my options, again, I can customize my predictions. So I can decide how many predictions are in the box. From anywhere from 3 to 10 could be in that prediction box. I can decide if the prediction box, I don't know if you noticed as I was writing, it was following me. So I can decide whether it follows me or not. And in that case, it'll just stay in place on the page. This predict ahead, what that'll do is, I'll show you. So when I turn it on, let's see if we notice the difference. Now, when I go to write, okay, as it's predicting the next word before I input a letter. Okay, so that's something you can decide in the options. It's a student by student basis, whether we encourage that or not. So students who have difficulty retrieving their words, where it's always at the tip of their tongue, it's a good option to have predict next word. Otherwise, we often encourage students to turn that off because we want them generating their own ideas and not just doing a result of the
World of.
And then
Okay.
they make a sentence and they're like, we're done. And we were like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So that's what can happen.
Yeah, so student by student will decide whether or not, again, in the options, the prediction, whether or not we predict ahead.
Business.
Oops, okay, we're going to stop that. Oh, and another thing, sorry, as I'm writing, when I put a period at the end of my sentence, maybe I have that turned off. In my options,
Okay.
speech. Oh yeah, so if I have speak on each sentence, it would read back the sentence to the child after they're done writing it, right? It's that option, pretty sure.
Maybe it's because, here, go back, maybe try that again. Let's see. There. Why is that not working?
It could be because we're also webcasting, like a lot of my internet's being,
Yeah.
but otherwise the students can always highlight and press play.
As a result of the world of.
Okay, to listen back to their writing. We usually recommend that at the end of even a paragraph. So after a student writes an entire paragraph, to listen to their paragraph, make sure they didn't omit anything or misspell anything, or that their ideas actually represent what their thoughts were.
There's also, I just wanted to mention, I know there's parents here who have very young children, so cycle 2, so grade 3 and 4. Basically what we recommend is sometimes at the beginning of learning how to write, we actually recommend putting it on listen to each word. So as the child types, each word will be read back to them. Okay, and that can be very useful for some children because as they're learning to write, they're not sure, they're not sure about that particular word. Okay, so it really depends on the settings, but usually for young children, I'll leave the read each word setting on. For older students, for high school, they go, oh, Andrea, that I can't take it, so we just leave the sentence, we just leave it, the setting on where it reads the full sentence after they're finished the sentence. So it really depends, really on the age of the student.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
But just another point you just made me think of for really young students, another thing we'll recommend, if we see, really early on that a student would be a candidate for something like word prediction, what I'll often recommend is that students practice typing. I know it sounds silly, but oftentimes if these students already have a difficulty figuring out which letter to put in for which spelling to put in, and they're not used to typing, that's just another barrier, right? Not knowing where the letters are on the keyboard. So we can even recommend you some websites if you want to help the kids practice typing in like a game-like environment. If this is something they'll need, because oftentimes if they're a really slow typer, I notice that they prefer to write even though it means spelling mistakes. They'd rather just write by hand instead of having something else block their thoughts. Does that make sense? So just one more tool before we wrap up, because I just noticed the time. Just another tool that's really cool for students to support their writing in the toolbar up here. And again, I know we didn't get to cover all the tools, but I promise we did the good ones. We did the main ones. This tool here, talk and type. So when I turn that on, what it's going to do, it's going to turn on a microphone and transcribe everything I say orally into words, period. This is dependent on me speaking slowly and clearly. It's pretty good at understanding my voice, even if a student has a speech impediment or an accent. However, it's dependent on the internet. So if there's a slow connection, there might be a lag in the way that it transcribes, period. Something else to think about with a talk and type, or this we call voice recognition, is that it's not easy to generate an entire paragraph off the top of your head. So there's a lot of planning that goes into using a tool like that. So if a student had to write a journal or a response and was going to write it with voice recognition, there's a lot of planning that goes into it, and actually a lot of revising and editing after the fact. So you'll notice some of the words I said, it didn't pick it up clearly. So a student would have to ideally go back, listen either one sentence at a time, one paragraph at a time, and make sure that everything they said is what got written down, and if not, make some editing. So for example here, it's depending on the internet. So if there's a slow connection, there might be, I meant a lag. So I'm gonna highlight here. I can turn it back on, a lag. Is that a word?
You try again?
Lag.
It doesn't like that.
Nope, not a good word.
No.
But anyways, it's a good example where, you know, in this case, you might take your time and go, you know, it's not that big of a word and it's not picking up.
Yeah, well, here's a good way actually for some students who use this. What we do is if they're spelling a very hard word and they're really not sure what it starts with and they're really struggling, then sometimes, as we said before, Olivia and I will just say, you know what, turn on your speech recognition, your talk and type, and just say the word, and then listen back afterwards and hear if it sounds okay. And that's really sometimes very empowering for some students who are just really struggling with spelling. So they can combine talk and type with text to speech. It might not be something that they go ahead and just dictate, you know, right away, because it is quite difficult. But for some students, they can use a little bit of typing, a little bit of talking, and it's a good combination for both. So some students will use that type of strategy. Okay.
I'm going to go back to the slides. Okay.
Yep.
And actually, before we even move on, just another little note, voice recognition that we just used. Okay. It's not, so in case there's IEP questions or ministry exam questions currently, voice recognition, we can't use that as an adaptation on ministry exams. It's not allowed by the Quebec government as an adaptation. But for homework, for, you know, if writing and reading is a tedious task and a overwhelming task for students, what we'll recommend is speech recognition, let's say for homework at the end of the day or for journal writing, where, you know, we're going to use word prediction as much as we can. That's allowed as an adaptation on ministry evaluations, but voice recognition is not currently. So we kind of want to also mix both so they're not dependent on one versus the other. But it's a great tool even just to see what they're saying be written down. There's no loss to that.
Okay, someone had a question about the EMSB email. Every child has an EMSB email and password. So if you don't have one yet for your child, on the EMSB website, emsb.qc.ca, on that page, you'll find a username and password request, and you can submit that request to IT, and they'll get back to you with the email and password. Okay, so
send
you
that
just request
link if you want to. After the webinar, we're going to send you a bunch of resources. We can send you that link.
Yeah.
And then the other thing though, Andrea, every kid has an EMSB email password, but at the beginning of the year, when parents sign forms to allow their kids to be photographed and all that, one of the tick boxes is that you allow us to create an EMSB email password. So if you didn't allow that permission at the beginning of the year, maybe you didn't know what it was, then I don't think there would be an email, but you can still request one now. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you sign that way, when you indicate to IT that you would like an EMSB email and passwords, you're stating that it's okay for us to create a Google account for your child. Okay, so just to know where all of that is accessible, because I know some parents didn't have access to the EMSB emails and passwords. Okay, it's not, someone said it's on the report card. Sometimes it is, which is really strange. Some schools have it and some schools don't. So that's what we've discovered. You definitely have your child's permanent code on the report card, so IT will need that to access your email and password for your child. So just take note of the permanent code, Quebec permanent code on the report card. That's always on all report cards. That's
and I
standard.
think I've also seen the email there and then not the password, and sometimes both and sometimes none. So I don't know how that works, but
we don't know how that works. Not our department, but yeah.
We'll help you get the answer, but we don't know.
We can get the answer, yeah. Okay, so I think there's a few, if there's any other questions, I think some people are making suggestions for where the EMSB website is. It's fantastic. We're just going to post the link to our evaluation, our feedback for this webinar. If you could please take the time to give us some feedback, that would be so much appreciated, just because we need to know if you'd like further webinars, if you're interested in other tools, what we did, if we did an okay job. If we didn't, please let us know. We do not take offense. We're able to take it. We work with children. We have very thick skin, so it's totally fine. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really happy that you could take some time off from all of our crazy schedules during this very crazy time. And we hope to see everyone back in the schools very soon. So